We've been fighting a long time, and we have all lost so very much, so many loved ones gone. But you are not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the planet. We are at the brink. You have no idea how important you are. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Ave Maria Stella Dei Mater Alma Atque semper Virgo Felix Teli Porta Christus Victi Christus Recta Christus Impera.
Coming at you with another episode of Ask Father Anything, kinda. What Father Really Say, kinda. It's clarification and a book promotion video here. Which, Father, by the way, you're in Texas.
That's right.
Right now, the greatest state in the union, especially if they get out. But anyway, how you doing?
Pretty good. Yeah. I mean, it is looking like Texas is about the best state in the union, at least on appearance. But yeah, that's true. Yeah, I just did a podcast with Taylor Marshall. So
Yeah, I think aren't you in? That'll be one of the questions bringing up. You're in there for the Libra Cristo conference, is that right?
yeah, well, actually, yes, that's right. We had a conference in Tyler, Texas, of all places, for the Libra Cristo uh, a conference. Yeah, so we had it there in Tyler. Originally, Bishop Strickland was supposed to be part of it, but as everybody knew, disinvited him from the diocese, so he can't do anything.
Yeah. All right. So books on the website, centradpress.com. We have a couple new ones. You've heard a couple of them already. Dominion and Papal Limitations on the Mass. Anyway, so let's talk about a couple of the books just for the people that do not know. Limits on Papal Authority.
Yeah, so this is the one. I mean, I've did a couple of things with Taylor, and I think I even did some with you. And
Yeah.
but it's one of those things that this book is laying out all the principles about when the Pope can and cannot make changes to the Mass. And then Chapter 9 actually deals with can the Pope suppress the old rite? And I lay out the principles about when he can and cannot suppress, or at least traditionally, and that is in the history of the Church, when popes have suppressed rights and when they haven't, because there's a lot of talk these days, and Rome seems to be, at least indicating or at least signaling that their intention is to get rid of the thing. So I just wanted people to be able to find out what the principles actually were that govern that whole thing. When we first released it, we had quite a bit of sales on it, but sales are slowing down. But I think that's largely because of the fact that people are unaware of it.
I mean, you get into, I think Prudence is
The
15,
longest
20
chapter.
pages. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the longest chapter. It's the reason so I go into the various kind of principles that actually govern. He can't do something contrary to the natural law. He can't do something contrary to apostolates. He can't do, etc. But the real reason I got so heavily into Prudence is because everyone was saying, well, this is a prudential matter, which is not exactly true. But if you're going to talk about it, well, then let's talk about it. And so I go through there and basically show that the 1960s was like the last time historically, or it's like the worst time, I should say, that they should have considered even making any liturgical changes. So, I got literally, it's kind of a tedious chapter, but I just wanted to make sure that there was no stone unturned about that question in Prudence. And so, yeah, it's really extensive on that side of things. Basically, I wanted to just show towards the end of it that they really should not have been making changes even on a prudential level.
Obviously, the links will be underneath in the show notes to get these books, and I'll post them on the community section on the channel. If anybody wonders where I post books, just go to the community section. The links are all there. You also bring up everyone's favorite, what's it, the encyclical, Quo Primum?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I talk about Quo Primum because everyone, because you'll hear people say, well, Quo Primum is infallible. And I'm like, well, where's your proof for that? And then they send you the text, which of course is a English translation, which has lines in it that actually don't appear in the Latin. I'm like, well, this isn't a sound translation.
Mhm.
There was a guy who just translated one just recently. I haven't had a chance to read through it thoroughly to really compare it, but it seems to be much better than the ones that are generally floating out there. It seems to be more accurate. It also gets a better flavor of the fact that in the Latin, it's a juridic language. But in the book, I make the observation that, Quo Primum in its mode of promulgation is not infallible. However, that doesn't matter because it's the principles that undergird the document that that Pius V talks about that are actually infallible. And it's in there he makes references to example for if an element has apostolicity, then or the apostolicity of the actual liturgies. And so I go into that quite a bit to basically give the Quo Primum can't just be considered, oh, well, this is just a historical document. It doesn't really apply. No, actually it does, because there's principles in it that he's laying out.
I wish I had that little GIF. The more you know, so we could just like, hey, if you get anxious, get worried about something that the Pope's doing or something. Hey, the more you know. Here, Father's got books on this, Magisterial Authority, books that,
Yeah.
as you said before, if you guys just read this, you'll be in a better shape.
Yeah, you won't. I think if you read this book, but then, like you said, Magisterial Authority or the Binding Force of Tradition, and also Consensus of the Fathers. I'm also going to do one here shortly, just a really short work on the Sensus Fidelium, uh, because it's one of those issues that has to be laid out clearly. But if you know this stuff, it doesn't matter when you see what's going on in the Vatican. Just like, well, it falls outside this particular purview, so I'm just going to fall back on the remote rule, which is the tradition. So you just don't worry about it.
Dominion. This should be fraught with a license because you could pretty much slap somebody across the head in a car or on the street. That could be a weapon. But you went in deep on this.
Yeah, it's a pretty hefty book. I can't remember. It's like 500 and some pages. The priest version, which is called the Nature and Psychology of Diabolic Influence, is 828 pages.
Yeah.
This book, we've talked a little bit about this book before, but it's one of those books that I think that I keep getting asked over and over again, can I do this? Can I do that? Well, if you just read the book, it's right there. So like, especially the chapter 4 on authority, the authority structure, lays it all about who can do what in the spiritual battle. But then it also provides, a basic framework so people understand the different kinds of diabolic influence and certain things that they can do. So this one has been selling kind of consistently. It obviously sold quite a bit at first, but it's kind of there's usually very often a bell curve with a book. When you first start selling it, it kind of rises up and then it kind of pans back down a little bit. But this one is kind of panned down just a little bit, but then it kind of evened off and it's selling pretty consistently. But this is something which is very helpful because it's not sensationalized and it deals with what spiritual warfare actually is from a with a sober point of view rather than a sensationalist point of view.
Yeah, and you quote some guy named Thomas Aquinas, whose feast day in the trad writes tomorrow quite often. I think he's probably half the book is his words.
Well, it depends. There are chapters where, like, for example, the chapter on angelology is almost entirely his. The demonology stuff is about like 60-70% his. The authority structure is like half his. But then when you start getting into the different kinds of diabolic influence, you have to basically shift towards authors that wrote usually from about the 1600s up until recently. Those are the authors that really speak more about those areas.
Yeah, just going at it, this is not the opinion of Father Chad Ripperger. It's heavily cited by people that have been in this program for thousands of years.
Right, yeah, and because a lot of times people, oh, well, that's just, he's an exorcist. He's just saying that's a pretty subjective approach. Actually, this book is as objective as you can actually get in the discussion of all that material. And it's also, like you said, it's not mine. I mean, there are times when I talk about things that come from my experience, etc., but it's not that frequently. It's dealing just, this is what the authors have said about the thing. And that was my goal. My goal is to write a compendium or a synthesis, I should say, a synthesis of all of the different authors throughout history. Because the difficulty is that the Rituale says that, and even in the new rite of exorcism, it says that you should consult the approved authors. The problem is the approved authors are stretched over 2,000 years of history, and unless you know Latin, you're just not going to get that much access to it. You're not going to be able to know what you're reading. And so I thought, well, since I do know Latin, and since I do have access to these things, I'm just going to boil it down to, this is a manual. So the larger one for the clergy, it's a manual you could hand to a priest and say, this is what you need to know academically as to be an exorcist. But then for the faithful, at least they can know the dynamics of spiritual warfare.
Now you write, all these books are academic, theological in a sense. You threw us a curveball, pun intended, on the last one.
Yeah, pun intended. That's right. That's right.
I was trying to look up his baseball card, by the way.
Well, the thing is that I've been trying to get a hold of the people there at the Boston Red Sox, because anyway, the reference so that the people know what we're talking about. My dad actually was drafted as a pitcher for the Boston Red Sox, and he actually did do some pitching. He was pitching quite a bit in the minor leagues and playing in the minor leagues, where they put you in just before you come up to the before you enter in. And then what he would do is that before he actually entered the majors, they would bring him in to do the pitching during practices, and he was striking out some pretty impressive people, and so but they ended up getting injured, so he couldn't finish his career on it. But anyway, this book is it's called exactly exactly, it's called Shop Talk, and it's basically about what you can learn, theological and philosophical lessons learned by me, but they're universal lessons, right? They're not just stuff that I can learn, but it's kind of puts it, there's a lot of humor in it. There's also a lot of interesting stories and things like that happened while we were at the shop. And that's actually the picture that you have up there right now. That's actually what the front of my dad's shop looked like. So, but in the book, and it's a picture book, that's why it's kind of expensive. It's not that long. It's only like 117 pages. But anytime you put pictures in a book, the cost of the thing just goes, through the roof. But the reason I wrote the book is primarily was to show that, use the things that I learned as a mechanic, like the fact that it doesn't matter how you feel. If the thing ain't fixed, it ain't fixed, things like that. So it's just, I just wanted to have something that people could read basically as how, basic common sense rules for life is basically what it is.
And if you want to see a photo of Father playing with the dog, there he is.
Oh yeah, there's our dog Sam. Yeah, when I was a kid. Oh yeah. Everybody in the family loved that dog.
I was telling Father off cameras that if anybody want to, he asked me what my thoughts were. I go, if you lived in this time period and riding bikes, TVs with bunny ears, all that, you'll read it and for me, I was able to picture myself in those times back in my grandma's house and bunny ears. Everyone's trying to, move the thing with the dial, trying to get the right picture in. Riding a bike, just going down the hill as fast as you can so you can get up the next hill. And I did chuckle at the part when you talked about no one wore a bike helmet. It's like, nobody. Up if you did.
And exactly. There was just ridicule to be had. You just like, what are you doing? And you looked, in our mind, you just looked completely silly. Of course, now I still ride a bike quite a bit, and I wear a helmet, but back then you didn't do it, and you were doing some serious speeds, and you were also I don't talk about this particular part of the book, but when I was a kid, we would set up ramps and do these jumps with no helmet or nothing on, and you get beat up a little bit, but that was life then.
Oh, and the freedom of it. I remember getting up, whatever, and riding to a friend's house. Going to the park for the rest of the day, coming back when the sun was going down, and the bugs were so bad. I used my high school jersey. It was one of those 2-ply, so it was white on one side and the color on the other, and I put it over my head as a mesh so that it would deflect the bugs. So I was just going straight downhill. Yeah.
So that was the bikes were quite significant when I was growing up, and not just even getting to and from the shop. It was the mainstay of how I went to work and came back from work.
The the sign that you guys had is it wasn't the right cost, but it was like, all right, $10 more if you start talking to us, and twice as much if you screwed it up and then brought it into us.
Then yes, exactly. Yeah. There's and people who have been mechanics or ever worked in a shop are gonna like, oh yeah, I've seen that, seen that, seen that, So it's but like I said, it's about common sense rules. So it's not, it's not just the stories about what happened, but it's also this is the lesson from that particular story. Like the time I got mad about the fact that I had worked on something and it wasn't fixed.
Mhm.
And then that's when I learned, the two essential lessons, which is, it doesn't matter how you feel, reality is independent of that. But then the other part of it is, too, is that, so you have to be as objective as possible. But then the other thing is, too, is that emotions just get in the way of really doing your job. So you got to put them aside. And so this is part of this because, when I would listen to these millennials talk, it was just a complete inversion of what my experience was growing up and working in my dad's shop.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I was reading it going, man, I remember that getting out, going to work with dad, and he had a bowling center, Toccoa, Georgia. I was like, can I ride with you? Can we go down? And it's a
Right.
2-hour ride to the bowling center, and we swept the parking lot of cigarette butts and things like that, or couldn't wait to go into back where the machines were, even though if you screwed up, it would crush you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's another thing too, is just learning all the, just learning basic caution and things like that around this stuff. So I think people would find it's an easy read, it's an enjoyable read that everybody who's read it said they really enjoyed it. So hopefully, but I know people have started buying it to give to young men, like between the ages of 14 and 18, and said, here, this is what you really need to know, as far as basic common sense and, how to approach life.
Yeah, yeah. Like you bring up about your dad was just working all the time, and when you got back from seminary, you complained about not having a time off or something. He kind of gave you the
Oh no,
ringer.
that
Like,
was back when I was a priest because I still even worked for him as a priest. Broken into 4 parts, but the priest part, I was complaining that I was working because I just gotten as a priest, I've been working my whole time I've been a priest, I just worked really hard. And so this, coming back and then having to work for him. And then I love that line of his. He said, what do you think I've been doing my whole life? So it's, I think people will enjoy it. So I hope it's out. There's also a lot of stuff about my dad in there, which will give people kind of a sense of, why I'm where I'm at today, and and why I'm the kind of person I am based on being raised by a father who is highly ordered as an individual.
no, yeah, no, yeah. Well, I won't give them the. You have to get the book to find out those parts. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's not for sale on Amazon. It's only for sale on Sensus Traditionis Press. It's the only place it's available.
but yeah, no, it's solid. Thanks for sending me. It was a very cool read, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'll still look for the baseball card though. And he slid into a base and got hurt. I was like, okay, well, it's before designated hitter, and
Yes. Yeah. 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 And actually, the like I said, what I really want to do is they have got to have like copies of his contract that he signed and
yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that. I'm trying to get a hold of the right people there. It's kind of a typical bureaucratic place where you say, hey, this is what's going on. Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, contact these people. And then those people, oh, no, you got to go to this office. And so it's just kind of like the Italian thing where you just run around and you never get to play.
Well, I
So,
used to have a friend that was the trainer for the Red Sox, but he's now with the Phillies. But I'm sure I could ask him and see if he knows anybody in Bo Sox to be able to.
yeah, if they can just, I would love to be able to see his file or the archive on that.
Let's see if we can work some magic out.
There you go.
Anybody watching that is with the Red Sox, contact.
Yeah, exactly. If you know someone inside that can get access to their archives so that we can find out that. But yeah, that'd be awesome.
Now to some Q&A in the sense of let's clarify some problems we've seen on the webs.
Yeah.
Mentioned the Libra Cristo conference you got going on. There's a difference between the Monte Cristo and the Libra Cristo group, and can you?
Yeah, so there's a kind of some confusion because technically speaking, Libra Cristo is its own corporation. It's its own independent thing, but it works very closely with the DeLorean Fathers because they've helped us develop a lot of material like the 4-phase protocol of helping people begin the process of, before they would get any help from us, they would be they'd have to go through this protocol, which would then help them develop virtues and stuff like that. So the Libra Cristo is, and it does a lot of training. So I work with them to do the training of exorcists and the laity primarily for this. We also are in the process of working with healthcare professionals. So we have about probably close to 70 or more healthcare professionals around the country that have been taking that we've been training to take a Thomistic approach to psychology, but then also to train them to be able to recognize this is what you would see if someone's possessed, obsessed, or oppressed, both psychologically and otherwise. So we're be training people with that. And so Libra Cristo works very closely with the Doloran Fathers. And then the Monte Cristo is something that's a little bit different. Monte Cristo is actually the it's an LLC. It basically does retreats and things like that. It does do some training, but it's the primary work I do with that is I do some of the retreats. So for example, we have some retreats coming up this summer if people are interested in taking a look at that. So Monte Cristo is not as connected to the Lord and Fathers as Libra Cristo is, but that's kind of so we've got the Father Son retreat and the Mother Daughter retreat. I'm not sure if they're full yet. Last I heard, I think they were almost full or about to be full or something like that.
They'll be full after this.
Yeah, they're really fun retreats. The place that we have is spectacular. And it's kind of funny. We even teach women how to fly fish if they want to learn how to fly fish. So,
Yeah.
But anyway, that's
that goes back to the book Shop Talk, by the way. He did a lot of fly fishing with his dad.
Yeah, exactly. So this is something that, if people want to go to Monte Cristo and take a look at those particular things, so I would encourage people to look at both Monte Cristo and Libra Cristo, both on the side of the laity, and especially for priests, they can get access to information that can help them in their training or understanding to do deliverance work and things of that sort.
Fantastic. Question 2. Can we ignore things not defined and not dogmatic?
Yeah, I've been noticing, because I made a statement that, when it comes to the Holy Father, look, unless he's defining things right now, I would just basically not pay a whole lot of attention to what he's saying, because people are just confused by it, putting aside any analysis of what he's actually saying. I'm just telling people, look, if you're confused by it, don't become hyper focused on what he's saying, because unless he's defining something, it doesn't. But so then people say, oh, well, so you're saying that unless he says something infallible, you can ignore him, and that's not what the church is. Well, yes, I realize that. That's actually why I wrote the books. The binding force of tradition, especially magisterial authority. What do you do with teachings that come from the Vatican or from the church that are not infallible by nature? What do you do with them? And there's a whole series of discussions about theological notes and the binding force of those different notes, and etc. And so I go into all that. I would recommend that people read that. But outside that content, so you can't just ignore those on one level. On the other hand, if you're finding it confusing, you really need to shore up that area of your Catholic understanding before you go back to reading those things. And that basically means going back to the tradition, reading what the tradition has always said in these matters, because then that becomes the manner in which you're going to be able to understand anything that's being put out recently.
AI. There are people out there using your image on videos, pretty much doing clickbait topics, titles, or saying stuff that you apparently didn't say, but saying that you said it, or some maybe even try. They haven't done this yet. I know I have the programs that can do it. That they haven't cloned your voice yet, even though it's not that.
Yeah, they have those programs. I think they're kind of costly right now, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I mean, to get the really good stuff to where, you can just type something in and it sounds exactly like me. In fact, I just recently watched a very fascinating video where they took AI, extracted Hitler's voice inflections and everything, and his actual tones and etc. out of his speeches. And then what they were able to do is type in the English translation of that, but you would hear it in his voice. It was fascinating, actually. But it was so funny because when you get done listening to it, like, this guy's just a narcissist. I mean, it's like, "I've done this for you, and I've done that, and I've done so go out there and vote for me," and, et cetera. So I'm just like, "Wow." I thought he was ranting about other stuff, but apparently
That was
not.
like that Biden robocaller. It conned a lot of people thinking that was really him.
Yes, exactly. So this stuff is good, and it's gonna get to the point where it's gonna be problematic, where I'm gonna have to basically restrict, unless you see it on your channel, Steve, or unless you see it in this place, you can't presume it's me, right? So, and not just me, but I think you're gonna start seeing a lot of this. I actually have a theory that eventually, photos and audio and video will be inadmissible evidence in court. Unless you have a eyewitness, nothing doing is what's going to happen, because people are just going to be able to fake it to the point where even experts won't be able to tell the difference. It'll be that kind of a thing. But anyway, yeah. So what's happening is that I'm getting, there we do have a certain toleration if people lift out small sections of videos and things like that, as long as it's not ridiculous, or or like what they would do to you. They would actually take
The
you
entire
make
video.
my audios into a video, and then they would just like cut your stuff off and then put their stuff up on there. So, and that's violation of copyright. We do have kind of a toleration of the shorter stuff, which we don't, as long as it's not too ridiculous, and as long as it's not making me out to say things I did not say, or it's not lifting it out of context. But then we have somebody who's recently, my lawyer is actually convinced that it's all three. My media lawyer. He's convinced that it's actually the same, or I should say, we're convinced it's the same person churning out this stuff on different channels. But basically, what they're doing is they're typing in their own stuff, and then it's an AI voice. It's not even my voice, but they have my picture up there, and they're saying it's me saying this stuff, and I never said this stuff. One of them was a little beyond the pale. In fact, it said that I claimed that I had it says Father Ripperger has had a vision of the Blessed Virgin Mary. This was said, I've never claimed that, and I would never claim that, and I've never had that, so, and if I did have the vision of Our Lady, I wouldn't tell anybody anyway, right? So it's one of those things that so those are kind of the concerns. We're working with YouTube to hopefully get it taken down. So
Yeah, those photos. Some of the photos are one of those like, come on now, let's stop
well,
doing stuff like that.
yeah, and some of the photos actually is violation of copyrights, because some of those photos are actually under copyright of me. So it's just that the people who have them haven't gone after the people that are using those yet.
But yeah, no, it's like you said before. I think Corbett brought that up. We're not going to be able to figure out what's real and what isn't online, or
That's right. Yeah, that's coming. I think that's really coming.
yeah, this
In fact,
question.
I would not be a bit surprised if we don't see a little bit of that in this election cycle.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's you see all these videos. You're like, is that real? Where's the real video at? And no one
Yes,
does the due diligence for it. But if you do it, you can figure out, hey, this is. I mean, we see it on photos, so it's the deep fake videos from last year, a year before, and that one group that came out with the AI just a couple months ago that were really. I mean, it looks like movie like standards good.
Yeah, and apparently, I mean, I've only been reading about this, and people have been telling me about it. Is that there's now pornography where they're taking famous people and put them on the people, the figures that are going on. I'm like, wow, it's gotten perverted. I mean, it's out of control.
Do you have conversations with demons, and is that prudent?
Yeah, one of the criticisms I get is people say, well, Father Ripperger is having conversations with demons, and you're not supposed to do that. Well, I don't have conversations. I have torture sessions where I beat the information out of them. And so usually when I recount it, I'll put it more in a colloquial, he said this, I asked him this, he said this. But all of that stuff is done in a very formal fashion that I never ask them for information without commanding them to tell me, okay, in the name of Jesus Christ, command you to tell me what is this. And it's not like I'm digging this information up. This stuff comes out in the process of the exorcism because it's connected to the people's liberation. So yeah, no, I don't do that kind of a thing. And I think that I think I might have mentioned this even with you, Steve, but the demographics of my two biggest critics are a certain segment of the population of women over 65 and young man between 10 and 30, or sorry, 25 and 35, and who's appeared to have a problem with chastity. That tends to be the the demographics that we're seeing. So, but anyway, that being said, yeah, and those are, so you get, those are the guys that tend to criticize me. Although once in a while you see a guy about our age who just kind of goes off on me, and I'm just like, yeah, okay. But it's one of those things that I don't do that. It's very formal. The only time I ever bring any of that stuff up publicly is if the person that it's happened with has given me permission, and as long as my bishop doesn't have any objections. But it's primarily that the person that it's happened to, that's possessed or something, doesn't have any objections, and that it has a catechetical point. It's not sensationalism, because there's one exorcist particularly who's that has been putting stuff out that I think is sensationalism, and it's just drawing attention to himself on that level, which I don't think is healthy. My principal goal for all of this is just to instruct people about, this is the way spiritual warfare works. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to avoid. But also, this is what, how the demons actually understand the Catholic faith and saints and things of that sort.
Yeah, do people think that you're sitting there like in the chair right there smoking a Monte Cristo? Just yap. Hey, Beelzebub, so how was your day today? I mean, is that what you think they're doing?
Well, that's what they imply, I think a lot of it, what it is when people don't like you, they're going to take what you do or say and then cast it in the most negative possible light, right? Because that's just the way human psychology is. So I think that that's basically what they're doing, and so stuff like that. Like, oh, you're just talking with demons. I'm not talking with them. They're taking a brutal beating to extract this information out of them.
It was like was it a couple months ago? You said something about the demon said something about Our Lady. I think it was one of the conferences you brought up, and people lost their minds with that. Don't believe what the demons. Wait, is that, like you said? Is that wrong?
Well, that's another thing. People say, well, you can't. They lie all the time. You can't trust anything they say. Okay, let's just say, take for the sake of argument, that's actually true, that you can't trust anything they say whatsoever. Then why does the church, in its formal ritual, tell you to ask what their name is, how many there are, how did they get in, when are they going to leave, and what is it going to take to get them out? Why does the church tell you to ask that? If they will not ever tell you the truth, well, then the church, and this has been going on. That particular ritual has been in the church for at least 14 to 1600 years. So it's not like it's not, obviously they understand something different about it than people who just think that, the demons are never going to tell you the truth. Actually, no, they do tell you the truth, and they tell you the truth when they're under duress. So if you get their threshold of pain, I tell them they're basically bankers, right? Once the threshold reaches a certain amount, they'll just cut bait and just give you the information to cut, so they don't have to deal with the pain, right? But until it reaches that threshold, they're going to hold out. Well, this is, and so basically when they tell you the truth, there's, and this is two ways that you can actually tell the truth. One is that when it comes to lying, they're like really bad liars. It's basically like watching a 16-year-old girl get caught by her father because she was out too late one night. No, I didn't I got in at 10 o'clock. No, I saw you came in at midnight. No, really, it was 10 o'clock. That kind of thing. They're on that kind of a level. They're just bad liars. And some of it is too, is they'll tell you something, and then they'll say, no, it's this. And they're kind of like watching you to see, is he going to buy it or not? It's that kind of a thing. And it's just like, come on. So, and sometimes they say stuff that's just so ridiculous. It's just like, yeah, I'm not buying that. But then the other thing is then there's what's called the principle of coherence. This is basically, if the demons are telling you something that's true, it's going to be coherent, or it will fit with, it will mesh with, or it will be in congruity with the church's teaching, the dynamics of the possession case, what you can know through the natural light of reason about what's possibly true and what's not true, etc. So it's all going to fit, and it's not going to contradict that stuff. And so, and the principle of coherence is not just over one session when they tell you one thing. Rather, they'll tell you that if they're telling you the truth, they'll be consistent over a long period of time. Whereas if they lie to you, they're a typical liar. Their story changes all the time. There must be something that God built into creatures that's part of the psychology, that if you lie, your story changes from time to time. And so they just, when they're lying, their story changes. Whereas when it's, and that's something that I'm very careful about, that I pay very close attention to. If their story changes just even a little bit, I'm just all over them about that, because then a lot of times that's when they'll admit certain parts aren't true or are true, or that they were holding out other information. So, I mean, it's a typical torture session. And so the demons are under tremendous pain. And when they're under tremendous pain, and here's another thing that most people don't know about demons, they only got to disobey God once. Everyone's got this idea that they just go around doing whatever they please, and that's just not true. They're completely under his control. In their mind, it's actually, which I talk about in my book, Dominion, that in their minds, God infused in their minds, as part of the third category of natural inclination, the natural law, the authority structure. And that authority structure, unlike us, where we can kind of disobey authority because we're kind of stupid and clueless, that authority structure is so absolutely clear and lucid that when they see it, they experience what we do. So when a demon, or when we as human beings, if someone who has authority over us says, hey, you are to do X, they give us a command. Internally, our experience is kind of being like we're held or bound to this thing, that we feel this force, or we're kind of compelled to, like, okay, I got to do this thing, right? On an intellectual level, and then our lower faculties, like, they try and deny it to some degree, but we're like, no, I got to do this. Whereas the demons, it's on a completely different level. When they receive a command to which they know they are bound, then they will simply do it, especially in relationship to God. As far as the exorcist goes, they know that he has limited authority, so he's got to work it up a little bit, and that God permits them to delay just a little bit the execution of his exorcist commands, depending on the circumstances. Other times they'll just do it immediately. But when it comes to God, part of the third category of natural inclination is God is to be obeyed, St. Thomas says. This is in his commentary on Peter Lombard's Sensus. So when he says God is to be obeyed, that understanding, that inclination that they have to obey God is so absolutely clear to them that every single time you can command them as the exorcist, and they'll hold out and hold out. And then all of a sudden, boom, they'll just tell you right away. And you're like, well, what happened there? He told me I had to tell you. And so they do it immediately. And because once they tell him, and because it comes from God, it's so compelling in their mind that they never deny it. Right. So in that particular case, they are perfectly obedient to God in matters when he says you have to do X. Boom, they just do it. And now that doesn't always come in every single session, but that gives you an indicator that demons actually have to obey. And so at a certain point, God will command them to tell us stuff, and they don't lie about that stuff. They're very frank. They tell you, they lay it all out. They're as clear as God requires them to be. They tell you exactly, no more, no less than they're perfectly obedient. And so it takes a while sometimes for it to get to that. It doesn't happen all the time, but when you see it, it's very clear. But on the side of the exorcist, as he continues to command, but because the authority was given by God to the Magisterium, or to the apostles, which comes then through the apostles. So the priest acting on behalf of the bishop, he's acting on his authority. The demons know they're bound to that. So over the course of time, they'll still tell you the truth. It just takes a lot of work to get it out of them.
Well, I appreciate it. Any upcoming? Are you working on any new books in the not so distant future?
I just have a couple of articles I'm working on just initially. The first, and then I'm going to launch into a large book. So the first article that I'm actually writing, it's called The Irrelevance of Relevance. Because it's, this business in the church where these bishops are saying, oh, we need to be relevant. Yeah. And then as soon as you're irrelevant. But I go into the whole psychology behind that, and historically what we saw, what they said, etc., and why it doesn't work on a theological or even on a psychological level. But then I'm also writing an article on, it's basically on the unicity of the soul's faculties, which basically means if you can the basic premise, which I'm writing that article as we speak, and it'll take a little while to get it all out. But basically, the basic premise of that article is that the cause is always some way in the effect is the basic principle. And so that means that the soul, if there is activity in a body that is truly human, any activity, at all, that means that that effect comes from the soul, and so the soul has to be present. And the reason I'm going into that, and that means basically that from the time of conception, there's specific activities of the soul that are independent of the mother that are occurring. And so that's an indicator that the soul is already present. But then also it's end of life issues of, just because grandma's on the, you can't just pull the plug on grandma unless there's certain principles that come into place. And so, or I should say, you can't knock grandma off. Because like if it's just because she's like in a comatose state, but if she's still breathing and things of that sort, well, you can't just say, oh well, she's brain dead and so we can pull the plug on her. That's not how that stuff works. There's a whole set of principles about when you can stop extraordinary means and things of that sort. But I wanted to lay out that principle of any time there is a human activity in the body, that means the soul is present, and then that means there's a set of moral principles that fall into place. So I'm working on that one. But then after that, I'm gonna do that short book on. It'll only be like 20 pages, actually, probably more like a pamphlet on the Sensus Fidelium, because I don't want to go. If I was to do an exhaustive treatment of it, it would be like 400 or 500 pages, because you had people like Congar and all these guys writing this stuff. They just muddied the waters. I'm just like, I want people to know what the real truth is. But then after that, then this summer, my goal is to launch off into the book on the psychology of masculinity and femininity. So it'll be about 1,000 pages, I figure.
Yeah, short reads, weekend reads.
Yeah, easy read.
Your relevance of the irrelevance. I immediately thought of that Mormon friend of yours in the book about, was it Question the Questions or something like that?
Yeah. 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 Or no, it was, what was the definition of definition?
Yes, that was it.
When I just looked at it and I said, it's the formulation of the essence of a thing. It was like I whacked him on the side of the head with a board. He's like, I got to go write that down. It goes running out. So,
well, good shot talk. I know it's not air gun.
Yeah,
best I could.
People will enjoy it. I think people will. They'll be happy that they read the book. Not just some people want to read it because they want to know more about me, which is that's not the reason I wrote the book. The real reason I wrote the book is for people to get a sense of, these are some basic lessons that you can learn from life.
Yep. But if you do want to see it, it has a photo of his bike, his cars, the dog, the shop, his dad.
Yeah, a few of me when I was a kid, even. Yeah.
All right. Well, Father, appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of the day. And before we go, can you give the people watching at home a final blessing?
Yes. Benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, super vos et manet semper. Amen. Thank you, Steve. God bless.